Thank you. It was the Indian Buddhist scholar Kautilya who remarked generations ago that a king who always cares for his elephants like his own sons is always victorious and will enjoy the friendship of the celestial world after death. And Cicero noted that the elephant has a fellowship with the human race. But at an alarming rate of 96 wild elephants slaughtered every single day, and one every 15 minutes, since the time we left the Lincoln Memorial, 7 wild elephants were killed for mere trinkets. 7. Since the time we left the Lincoln Memorial. And while today we teach our children that E is for elephant and not extinction, and when they read Dr. Seuss' Horton Hears a Who, they can identify the elephant as a living creature. Sweet little Adeline and tomorrow's children, at this rate, if we don't act right now to close the ivory markets completely, they could grow up to think of Horton like a dinosaur from Jurassic Park, as a beautiful creature that once was, but was driven to extinction so that its slaughterers could profit and fund terrorist activities throughout the globe. And we've heard from distinguished speakers before me that China, behind China, our own beloved America, is only second in the world in terms of consumers for ivory. And that's why when traffickers were using ports in my home state of New Jersey to smuggle it to New York City, Senator Lesniak and I needed to act, and we acted swiftly. But we were repeatedly asked throughout the legislative process, why don't you tone down your bill? Why don't you make it, with all respect to New York, why don't you make it like the New York ban, a compromise that exempts old ivory or products containing a certain percentage of ivory? And if it's elephants you want to protect, why are you messing around with rhino horn and whales and hippos and narwhal and walruses? And the answer is this. Because when it comes to protecting endangered or threatened species and conservation and national security, there can be no compromise. There can be no compromise. And already, the existing federal ban on importation and interstate ivory commerce was being skirted by poachers and traffickers and distributors, making illegal ivory look like legal mammoth or fossilized ivory. And they've gotten so good at it. They've gotten so good at it that even experts at labs throughout the country can't distinguish. They're having a challenge in distinguishing legal ivory from illegal ivory. And we heard about these challenges from law enforcement and Fish and Wildlife Service officials themselves. And so rather than shift poachers' efforts or allow them to adapt, the only way to end poaching and trafficking and end the blood ivory trade is to close the markets and end consumer demand completely. And to effectively close the markets, you need a complete, full ban on ivory commerce. No exceptions, and that's what we did in New Jersey. And I call on all of you to do your part and to explain the urgency to legislators in your own states and make sure that your state follows our lead. Because you have the power, look around you, you have the power of grassroots advocacy in your hands. And my fellow elephant lovers, that power is yours to waste. And so, and I know I don't have to tell this crowd that it's not enough for you to march today, and that it's not enough for you to retweet and share Facebook posts about it. I don't have to tell this crowd that you do have to go home, and you have to go home and continue to act, or you will find yourself to be well-intentioned neutrals. And as Desmond Tutu said, using our own gentle giants as an example, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. And if an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse and you say that you are neutral, that mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. And so you know, I'll share in closing, you don't need lobbyists and you don't need super PACs, you don't need the artificial shallow kind of political influence, because you have all the influence you need right here in terms of grassroots advocacy. That's how Senator Lesniak and I got ivory banned completely in New Jersey. And while there may be times when we're powerless to prevent injustice, there must never be a time where we fail to protest. But this is not such an occasion, because we are not powerless. We can end the blood ivory trade, and we still have time to save the elephants if we close the marketplace. So I'm going to close with a little anecdote about the process in New Jersey. Because the stages we went through, I think ought to inform your own advocacy. I don't want you to be discouraged when you're fighting in your own home states or in your countries. I don't want you to be discouraged, so I'm going to share this with you. I'm no Ray Lesniak. I'm a kid from Jersey City, occasionally a degenerate and a young freshman lawmaker who ended up in the legislature by accident. So when we first introduced this bill, in my house, the folks didn't pay any attention to the bill. I wanted to do a press release to call attention to it, and people were saying, listen, kid, we have a property tax crisis. We have an austere economy. You're on the budget committee. Focus on crafting a $35 billion state budget. And while that's true, they ignored me and this particular crisis as if we as legislators can't walk and chew gum. And then as the bill started picking up momentum, they were amused. And they thought it was cute. And they made fun of us that this is what we were cashing in our chits for. This is what we were expending political capital on. And then, as we started making people aware that our ports were a hub for illegal wildlife trafficking, and that the significant profits from this trafficking and poaching, as a former sergeant in the Marine Corps, these profits from poaching were directly funding the operations of terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda-affiliated Al-Shabaab and Janjaweed and the Lord's Resistance Army and others, that this was a current and very grave national security threat. And Meryl Streep speaks out about it, and people started to take us seriously. The opposition starts to mobilize, and auction houses, and members of the NRA, as Wayne referenced, and whose firearms contain some ivory, and knife collectors, and even the musicians who didn't get Billy Joel's memo that music ought to be an instrument of life, not death.
Yes.
All came forward saying their property rights were being infringed, without regard to the rights of an entire species to live and breathe. And so the opposition mobilized. But then over the objections of the NRA members and the vocal knife owner lobby, and I'm proud of him for his leadership, we got Governor Christie to do his part to end the nefarious activities and sign it into law. But those four stages that we went through, they remind me of something that I want you to bear in mind when you advocate in your own home states to get this done there. And that's a saying by Mahatma Gandhi. First, they ignore you. Then, they laugh at you. Then, they fight you. Then, you win.
Yes!
Then, you win.
Woo! All right!
1, 2, 3, 4. Ivy's what they're dying for. 5, 6, 7, 8.
It's not too late.
It's not too late. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ivory's what they're dying for. 5, 6, 7, 8. Stop the train. It's not too late.